Now, the process that we go through. The exam, even though it's a computer-based exam, process questions come up quite a lot. As I think I have mentioned earlier, you will get quite a few questions that in effect talk about what are the stages that you go through. They might well have these stages and they've mixed them up, and you have to put them back in the right order. So, training and development process. Training doesn't just happen. Somebody has to plan it and has to think about it. So let's make sure we're happy with the stages that we go through. So first of all, what are the training needs of the organisation? If you're working for an accounting firm, we've already said, you might get something like new international accounting standards, IASs, which will mean people need to be trained on them because the way that they prepare accounts has been changing. Similarly, if the tax rules change, then we will need to have some kind of training. Those kind of training needs are usually very, very easy to identify. Similarly, if we change the computer system that we have, very easy to identify that you need to train people how to use this computer system instead of the old one. The bit that's tricky would be where we're looking at things like, should we train people to be able to deal better with customers? Should we train people to be more innovative and come up with new ideas? How do we train people to perhaps be more efficient? So these aren't quite as obvious areas for training. So assess the training needs of the organisation. Does everybody need training in something, or is it only certain departments? Is it everybody in a particular department, or is it only certain individuals? So the training needs of the organisation, some things everybody needs training on, some things certain department needs training on, some things individuals need training on. So you need to work out what every single person in the organisation needs to be trained in. You need to decide what the objectives are going to be. So when you have carried out the training, what will people be able to do? Will they have an awareness of something? So you haven't trained them in any great detail, they just know about something in vague and general terms. Will they be able to work faster after the training? Will they be able to work better after the training? So what exactly is the training supposed to do? Those two stages, very, very important, because without those two we can't do the next stage. The next stage is to plan how the training will actually be carried out. Are we going to send people on a course that they have to go and attend away from the workplace? Are we going to send them on a course which is within the workplace? Are we going to train them as part of their job? In other words, sitting down at their desk, doing their normal job, and we do the training while they're carrying on with their normal work. How exactly are we going to do this? Are we going to talk to them? Are we going to give them a manual, so something written? Are we going to do both of those together? Are we going to do it individually? Are we going to put it in groups? How are we going to do these things? Now, when we talk about training, lots of students think that training basically starts with the fourth stage. The fourth stage there is to deliver the training. So, how are you going to be trained? Well, I'm just going to stand up and tell you how to do something. But it is very, very important that you've gone through the first three stages before you do the fourth one. Now, I'm sure that this has happened to you at some point when you've been working. In fact, it's almost certainly happened to you away from the workplace as well. You're trying to do something. You've got a job that you're doing, you've got a task you're doing. Somebody comes up to you, it could be a colleague, it could be a friend, it could be whatever, and says, can you show me how to do something? So can you show me how to do this? You're good at doing this, show me how it's done. And what lots of people will do at that point is they'll turn around, talk to the person who wants to know how to do something, show them how to do it. They'll simply start, they show them what to do, the person wanders off, and 20 minutes later they're coming back again saying, I didn't quite get that bit in the middle, I didn't quite understand what you did. Why do they come back again? The reason is because the training hasn't been very good, because we didn't really think what we were going to do. Now, what would be a much better idea would be somebody comes up to you and says, please show me how to do this. Don't say anything to them straight away. Simply say to them, I will go away for 5 minutes and I will think about what you actually need to know and what you need to be able to do when I finish the training and what's the best way of me doing it. Should I demonstrate it for you? Should I just simply tell you what to do? Should I work through it side by side so I do it as you do it and then you can copy me? Go away for 5 minutes, think about what the best way to do the training is going to be and then come back and show them. And if you do that second approach, yes, it takes longer, but the training will be better and the chances are that the person will understand what you were saying and they won't have to come back to you again. Now that's what's very, very important with training. Companies spend millions and millions and millions of dollars a year training people, and a lot of that money is wasted because they haven't really thought, what's the training trying to achieve? What is the need? What does somebody actually need to do? Then, how's the best way to train them going to be done? Now, again, it could be wasting millions of dollars sending people on training courses that aren't very useful, but more likely it's the millions of dollars that is wasted inside companies by me showing you how to do something or explaining a task, and because I haven't thought about it very carefully, I don't actually do a very good job. So the next time that somebody comes up to you and says, can you show me how to do something, say yes, but give me a few minutes before I do, and then think about what you're going to do. The training will be better. Now, all of those are important, and they lead up to delivering the training, so we actually train somebody what to do. But what is also useful is to evaluate what you've just done. So I have just trained you how to do something. I need to know if the training is useful, if it's good. If it is useful, I can do the same thing again. If it's not useful, I'll need to think of a different way of doing it. So the idea is, again, that we need to think, what's the best way of doing something? Now, if we're going to evaluate training, evaluating training, as I've just said, simply means, was the training useful or not? How can I do this? How can I actually evaluate whether the training itself is useful? One possibility is to ask the people who've received the training whether they enjoyed it or not. The big problem with that is often the best training is stuff that they haven't actually necessarily enjoyed. If you ask people if they've enjoyed a course, that's not the same as it being useful. So asking people what they thought, the people who attend the course, is not necessarily the best way to do things. On the other hand, you could measure what trainees have actually learnt. You could, for example, give them a test. So, I don't care whether you enjoyed the training or not. Here is a test. If people do well, the training was good. If people didn't do so well, the training was not very good. That, of course, works very well if I can test whether the training has worked. So if, for example, it's a training where there's a lot of facts to remember, then I can test whether people remember those facts. If they do, the training was useful. Measuring changes in job behaviour after attending the training. So what I could look at there is, how did you deal with the customer before you went on the training? How did you deal with the customer when you returned from the training? If I feel that you have got better, you deal with customers in a better way, then presumably the training itself was quite useful. The fourth way of evaluating training is to think about its impact on the results of the organisation, things like its profit. If, for example, we have trained all of our workers to improve their customer service, and customers like that, we will get more customers. we will therefore get more profits. If we've trained our staff so they can do things more quickly, that will keep our costs down, and again, that will increase our profits. So, bottom line, if it's improved, the training was helpful. That's a very good way of measuring whether training is helping. The trouble is it's actually very difficult to measure it in real life, because it might be difficult to say why profits have gone up. The training in customer service might only be one part of that. And finally, the impact of training on its value to the organisation. We send people on training courses. Do people view our organisation as being friendlier? Have we got a better reputation for looking after our customers? Have we got a better reputation for coming up with good ideas? So the values of the organisation, how do we look to the outside world? Has it improved that? All of those are ways of evaluating training. They all look at things in slightly different perspectives. Now, just as there are various kinds of training, there are also various types of development. And the various types of development that we are interested in at this stage are as follows. Management development. Develop management skills and experience. So the idea is, with management development, that I am trying to give you the skills so that you'll be a better manager in the future. So, for example, we were talking about recruitment earlier on, back in Chapter 1. If I have to interview people, that is a skill. Now, I've never interviewed anybody, so if I have to interview somebody, I will probably do a very poor job of it. I'll actually end up recruiting and selecting the wrong person. So you could be sent on a development course, interviewing skills, how to ask the right questions, how to select the right candidate. So that would be development, because I'm going to be using something later on. Career development. Career development there is about perhaps getting skills for other parts of your organisations. And you can see the sort of things we have there, things like a secondment or a transfer. Transferring people to other parts of the organisation to see what those things do, to see what other departments do. Transfer somebody abroad for 2 years. When they come back, they will come back with lots of knowledge about the location that they have just been working in for a couple of years. What are customers like in that country? What are colleagues like in that country? Are there things they do different which are better than what we do? So they can come back with a different perspective. It's very useful in an organisation to have people who have worked in other places, in other parts of the organisation. Secondments are basically the same thing, but they tend to be shorter term. So you could be put on a secondment somewhere for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, so you get an idea of what somebody else does. Now, why are things like secondments and transfers important? Well, I would argue that they are good because it gives people a chance to see that the department they are in is not the only one that is important in the organisation. It's very easy in some companies to spend all your time working in one department, so you only ever think about that particular department. You never really see the company in the same way that the customer sees the company. So you're always getting fixated on what the marketing department does, or what the finance department does, or what production department does. All of these departments are just part of a large organisation. So it's useful to be able to see how they all fit together. Now, I would suggest it's particularly useful for people in finance. When you are working as an accountant, one of the things that you will almost certainly do is you'll see how are the other departments performing. You'll be setting budgets for them. You'll be doing variances when they report at the end of each month. Now, surely, if you have done some work out in these other departments, you will understand more about the problems that they face and why perhaps the budget wasn't very realistic, or perhaps understanding why they have got these particular variances. As an example of that, my sister, this is my younger sister, she trained as an accountant. and she started working for the Electricity Board, which are based up in London. In fact, her office was about 300 metres from the head office of the ACCA. And so she joined what was then called the London Electricity Board. This was back in the days when the Electricity Board was owned by the government. So we're going back a few years. But my sister joined as a trainee accountant. I was off at university, and I came home after about 6 months being away, and I said to my sister, how is the job going? How is the finance department? You're an accountant, so how is the finance department? And my sister said to me, I have no idea what the finance department is like because I haven't actually been there yet. So she spent the first 6 months of her working life as an accountant basically not doing any accounting whatsoever. So I said to her, what kind of things have you been doing then? And she said, well, one of the things she did was she went to the places where they generate the electricity, the power stations, to see what actually happens so that she could understand when she was talking about costs, the kind of things that they are spending the money on. And she did that for about 3 or 4 weeks. I seem to remember her saying to me she spent about a month working with the people who dig up the roads to lay all the cables. She spent another couple of weeks working with the people who check all the electricity lines to make sure that they can actually provide electricity to customers and the people that have to fix those lines when something goes wrong. Now, the idea behind all of that was that when she finally went back to the finance department and she worked in the office, when she saw information about a particular department or when she saw information about a particular cost, it wasn't just a number on a piece of paper. She would understand what the costs represented and therefore be able to do a better job of interpreting what they meant. So it was 6 months where, to be honest, she didn't actually do anything about the job she was being paid to do. She didn't do any accounting at all. But she always said it was one of the most valuable things that she did because she appreciated there were other people who were doing work that was just as important and she could understand what that was. So career development, doing things like secondments and transfers to other departments. Very, very important for accountants that they appreciate the work that other parts of the organisation does. We've got professional development. Now, at the moment, what most of you are doing is actually professional development. A course like F1 in particular is probably not training because for a lot of you, you don't actually need these things at the moment. You're probably not recruiting anybody. You probably don't interview anybody. You probably don't decide what training courses other people are going to be going on. So at the moment, this is a development thing so that you can think about skills you will need in the future. And you may think that once you have qualified and once you've got your ACCA qualification, that that's the end of your development. Unfortunately, it isn't. You will have to do what is called CPD, Continuing Professional Development. The ACCA will require you to continue going on courses. They may be technical courses like International Accounting Standard updates, tax updates. They might be courses such as recruiting, selection, etc. But the ACCA will require you to carry on always trying to develop your skills. So CPD is something that you'll have to do after you've qualified. The final ones that we've got here, we've got what's called personal development. And personal development simply means to improve your own competencies, to improve what you are good at. Things like doing development courses in report writing or time management or anything else which is going to improve you personally. So personal development may not necessarily be related to the workplace. It could be something that you do on your own through looking at, self-help books, stuff like that, to develop yourself as a person. Companies are increasingly realising that if people are happier in themselves, if they're happier at home, then they often tend to be happier and more productive at work. So there are lots of different development courses that you might be attending. Remember, at the moment, you may just be interested in the kind of courses that you need to attend. At some point, you will be the person saying, here is somebody who works for me, you need to go on a development course for this, or you need to do on a training course for that. So at some point, when you are the boss, you need to decide what training and development the people working for you are going to require. As we've already said, in a way, training is easy to identify. Somebody's got a task to do and they can't do it. Train them how to do it. Development is a lot harder because there is no immediate need for it. We will see when we start talking about motivation in a few chapters' time that people respond to development courses. Training courses they accept because they feel I have to have this to do my jobs. But a lot of people like going on development courses because they can feel that they are progressing. And we will see when we talk about the ideas of a guy called Maslow later on in the course that that's a very powerful way to motivate people. Development courses are very good ways to get more out of your staff.